This is a guide to calculating weekly active users with Motif. Really, it could work for monthly active users or any kind of time frame you're looking at. We're working with the Motiflix dataset, which has the kind of events you'd see with a video streaming service. This can be very straightforward. We're going to just ask the Copilot for that we want to split sequences by week. That was quick. But let's walk through what's happening. This code looks a lot like sessionization. So match meaning let's find a pattern. Split meaning when you find that pattern, split the sequence every time we see a new pattern. Events is a tag name. We might call this something like active week. The empty parentheses means match any event. And then the plus means occurring one or more times. So right now, this just vacuums up all of the events into a single tag. But because of the if statement, we're going to start breaking that up. So let's look at the if statement. So the key function here is time bucket. And that's going to take a timestamp and basically group it into a date part. So this could be grouping it by week or grouping it by day or by year or by quarter or whatever unit you're working with. In this case, we're saying bucketize the time by week. And suffix 0 is, remember, whatever's behind our selected sequence. And 0 means the first index. So the first thing in the next sequence, and that's got to be, the week for that is got to be greater than the time bucket, the week bucket for events -1. I have to change events to active week because we changed our tag. And then index -1 means the last thing. So within my current selection, the last thing that occurs, bucketize it by week, and that has to be a different week that is less than the first event in the next sequence. I hope that makes sense. So let's take a look at what that did. I move myself here so we can see this. And I'm going to shrink active week. Well, that just makes it clean so I can see each week here. But for this user, we split into 6 different weeks. And then this user, 7 different weeks, and so on. So that seems to work, but maybe we can investigate a little bit further. One thing I could do is actually put the week into the sequence so we know what we're looking at. So I can just use one of these time buckets, the active week. And so what this is saying is create a new variable or new dimension called week, which is the time bucketed value of the timestamp for the last item in the week. This could be the first item, it could be the last item, it doesn't matter. Because we know it's that within that week it's all the same thanks to this if statement. Okay, so now what we see here is starting to kind of look like the week that the user is active. So this first user only has one active week, and it's the week of 6/24. This user, same 6/24. But this user, multiple active weeks. So looks like we are splitting this correctly. And we see all that activity during the week. All right, now what we want to do is plot this so we can kind of see what our weekly active user number looks like. Remember, when we're in the examples tab, we're really trying to define the sequences that we're then going to aggregate and analyze in the other tabs. So we think we've got the right sequences here. Let's click over to one of these tabs to analyze it. In our case, we're going to use plot. So here we're going to make the x-axis that week variable that we created. And that looks pretty good. And then count star. So this is just counting up the users that we see within that week. So June 17, 1,700 users. June 24th, also 1,740. That's interesting. June 10th, 1,655, and so on. A few things we can do to clean this up. If I bin the week value by week, we're not really changing anything, but we're just making it a little cleaner. And then on count star, I don't think we want to normalize that because we actually want to see the total behavior. Okay, 1710, 1714. So in terms of weekly active users, this app is growing linearly, but in the last week, which is the week of June 23rd, we only saw small growth from the prior week. So maybe We want to understand the slowdown here that we're seeing in these last few weeks. We did notice the value change in these last weeks when we added the binning. Let me remove that and just go back and show you what that looks like. So 1654, 1730. Okay, so we're noticing these values are dynamic, and I thought it would be good to address that. So I'm going to go back to, I'm going to bin by week. So remember, when there's lots of sequences, in order to be really responsive in your analysis, we're doing some sampling behind the scenes and estimating the final values. But this query more button will allow me to basically, force Motif to get the final numbers. So this is really important for like a plot or something we want to save. But it might take a while because if you have a large data set, we're going to have to run these queries across everything. But now we know we've got the final data here and not the estimated data. So we go from 1714 and then in June 23rd, 1707. So we actually start decreasing. So that's a pretty important insight. It wasn't just a slowdown in growth. It was actually a decrease in growth now that we've finalized our accounts here. Okay, so today we calculated weekly active users. We used the Copilot to give us our code snippet here, which works a lot like sessionization, except we're using time buckets on week instead of the time between events like you would with session. We learned about the time bucket function. We're using it on a weekly basis. And then we created a sequence dimension, so we could see the active week on our sequence record. We plotted that, and then we learned about how to query more in order to finalize the counts within our data set. I hope that helps.